respected Thay, dear noble community, welcome. So last week we talked about the bodies of the Buddha, and some of our brothers and sisters were in Glasgow, Scotland, to represent the Sangha in Thay's teaching to those who are doing their best to try to change the situation of the climate crisis. And this Sunday we listened to Thay Phap Luu and Thay Phap Luu, as well as Sister Thay share about how to see that we are all interconnected, that the way we live on this planet is affecting how others live, not only people, but plants, animals, and minerals. And that it's possible to transform our anxiety and fear around the climate crisis. This is why Thay's teaching is so essential, because fear can paralyze us and we feel we cannot do anything. So it's important to recognize that that feeling of fear and anxiety is impermanent. We are impermanent and motherhood is impermanent. In that there's freedom, and we know that all of us here know that it's possible to change our way of living, change our habits, change our mind. And that gives us hope that this is possible. Just that we come here together, we decide to come to the monastery, to live simply, live in community, eat together, walk together, play together, and water the seeds of joy together, then we know it's possible to do it. Because there's no other way except doing it together. Even we have all kinds of perceptions about each other, even we cause each other to suffer, but somehow we have to do this together. So, thank you for your practice. Thank you for being a model for the world. Just doing this practice, like we learned in the Dhamma body of the Buddha, we have the precepts body. We're here at the monastery, we're practicing to not to kill, not to steal, not to engage in sensual misconduct and so forth. And we have the concentration body, concentration on emptiness, sightlessness, aimlessness. We get an insight that we are not a separate self, and that is the topic of this class, the 23rd Tenet. We can talk as a continuous and ever-changing stream. of 5 aggregates. The 5 skandhas. The stream is always flowing. It is in connection with. And interchanges with. With other streams of phenomena. We cannot speak of a person as an unchanging and permanent, separate self. Unchanging and permanent. Separate self. So, we talked about the 3 Dhamma seals, and we already covered that a few months ago. Impermanence, non-self, and nirvana. And so non-self is also a kind of concentration. For example, when we look at this body, we see that this body is made up of the earth, the air, the water, heat. And if you take out the earth and the water and the air and the heat, then you don't have anything left that you can call yourself. This is me, mine, myself. Another way to look at it is with the 5 aggregates. Body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. So we talked about how in realizing that this body is not me, I'm not limited by this body. So we have the tendency to think this body is me. But actually this body is just an aggregate of physical processes, right? So we have water and air and earth and fire, elements like carbon and oxygen, nitrogen, all coming together, flowing, cells combusting the oxygen we breathe in through our mouth, and this wondrous interchange of fluids, of air, of heat is constantly changing, constantly catalyzing chemical reactions in our body. And wherever we look in that body, we cannot find a cell or something we can call the conductor. It's like an orchestra without a conductor, Thầy like to say. There's this beautiful music that is happening in the body, like a grand orchestra, but no conductor. And that is not for the point of feeling like sad or lonely. It's for our freedom. It's actually a great freedom. Usually when you think about yourself, you feel a little bit sad. There's some kind of attachment that comes in. You start to think, oh, yeah. Maybe you look at your hand and you remember when your hand you were just a child, and you think, oh gosh, I have all these scars on my hand. It's getting older, wrinkles. And you miss that idea you have of yourself as a younger person. Or if we see the body of another, like our mother or our father, getting old, passing away, and then we start to feel sad. We think, oh, that self, my mom, I'm losing her. Because you don't see that she's in every cell of our body. We are the continuation of our mother. We are a stream that is that is flowing from the womb of our mother into the present moment. And so the insight of no self is not for the purpose of negation, but for the purpose of realizing this wondrous existence, this wondrous experience of awareness, and not grasping onto anything. So when the Buddha talked about the 5 aggregates, he talked about them as the aggregates of grasping. Upadana kanda, upadana skanda. I think I shared about this. These are it means the aggregates. Skanda is like actually this it has you can think of it as a tree when branches go off, that kind of mass where you have branching off of different things, right? So we have body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, consciousness, these different aspects of our experience in every moment that we try to grasp onto as me, myself, or mine. And then when we believe this to be me and that changes, we suffer. So the Buddha used an image of like a river and a man in a boat. He's going down that river and there's reeds and grass and we can say cattails And as he flows down that river, he tries to grasp at the grass, but it just pulls out. And the same with the reeds, the same with the cattails. He tries to grasp onto it, but he cannot. And he just continues to flow. So that is like the present moment, always flowing, always changing, always in motion, not fixed. And yet, in our thinking, we want to make something fixed, something that's me, mine, or myself. And so we try to grasp at the grass on the bank of the river, but we cannot. It just comes right out. The flow is too strong, and we ourselves are also changing as the one flowing down the river. So it's just a metaphor. Thầy talked about the Greek philosopher Heraclitus. He said that a man cannot step in the same river twice. You cannot step in the same river twice. The river is always changing, and the one who is stepping into the river is always changing. So the one who steps in the river, as well as the river, are not ever the same. There's nothing fixed, and that was an insight that he had that had an influence on Greek philosophy. And all of this is what we call a concentration on non-self. So reflecting on the impermanence of the body is a concentration. It helps us to let go of the blockages in our consciousness. We just shine the light of mindfulness somewhere where we feel, oh gosh, maybe you're thinking about someone in your life and you're having a difficult relationship with that person. Your whole day you might have arguments, arguing with that person. You feel sad because of what they said, what they think about you, what they feel, and you continue to just water that seed, but then you realize, that's because I'm caught in an idea of myself. I just continue to, it's just that person, they said that thing, and you have that perception, and then you continue to believe that you yourself are that thing that they said, that they did. So the deeper practice, I find, is to go and look and see what is actually my experience in the present moment. And I see, if I continue to dwell on those perceptions that that is myself, I feel sad, I feel lonely, I feel cut off. But if I come back to my breathing, come back to my body, not grasping, just aware of the breath, aware of the body. Just breathe. Breathe out. And smile. So it's just the body, just the breathing, and joy can manifest. There can be the possibility of joy. Just by breathing, no longer giving attention to that perception, that continual, what that person thinks, or what you think they think about you. I practice this very often. Even as a monk, living in the community, actually we can have a lot of perceptions about each other. And we live together and we work together, and so I've learned that I can always learn from the perception that someone else, something they say or they do, but I don't have to believe entirely what they are saying, because they are also suffering. So I get in touch with their suffering, and I also try to look how might I have contributed to that suffering. And then from there, I can change my behavior. So that is an empowering way. It gives you the key to changing, to opening the door to a new possibility. And if I just continue to dwell on that perception, then it just becomes like a merry-go-round. You just keep going around and around and around and around and around in the same argument in your head. And meanwhile, you're watering the seeds. It means you're stimulating your hormonal system actually to generate a feeling of fear, anxiety, sadness. So, and that has very little to do with what the other person. That's just in your own mind. That's what you're doing. So the practice is making the choice to generate a feeling of joy, to let go of grasping at that perception. And so the purpose of the teaching on non-self is not to try to negate who we are, right? It's not to try to say that we don't exist, right? So don't misunderstand. It's for the purpose of letting go of our grasping. Upadana is this grasping, this energy of grasping. I think I told the story of these group of monks that were practicing to look at the impure aspects of their own body in order to let go of their attachment to their body. They saw they're still attached to their body and also attached to the beauty of another body. And so they heard this teaching of the Buddha, which is to reflect on this body and the not so beautiful aspects of the body, like the mucus and pus and saliva and blood and intestines and excrement and all these things, which are also wonderful. But sometimes when we look at a person, we think about if you're really like attracted to someone, I invite you to reflect on their bowels and their excrement. It's very helpful. You see, oh, just behind this wall of skin, there is also, just like everyone. And so that helps you to get less attached, right? If you're kind of obsessed with that person, their face or their whatever. So they were practicing this, but they grasped it the wrong way, and they thought, because I have a body, then I can never be happy. And so in order to change the situation, they actually committed suicide. And the Buddha heard about that, and he had to give a very strong teaching to his students. The teaching of non-self, of the impurity of the body, is not to reject the body. It's to let go of our grasping at the body, to see that this is an ever-flowing stream, and you cannot grasp onto it without causing suffering. So just practice letting go. So non-self is the practice of letting go. And if we continue to somehow deep down have this idea that we are a separate self, deep down inside of us, there will always be some kind of blockage, some kind of subtle grasping that is making us somehow suffer. And that's what the mindfulness practice helps us with. I find it. I mean, this is a kind of like it's a meditation, right? It's a way of cultivating the mind to just let go, to go, and we say go with the flow, right? But it means let go of the flow. Don't try to hold on to it. Just see whatever it is in you that continues to grasp. And then you train yourself in your sitting meditation to attend to those things which are there and are clearly impermanent, like the breath. So that's why we start with mindfulness of breathing, because the breath is, we cannot say there is a self in the breath. It's very obvious. Nobody gets caught in the thing. The breath has an identity or a self, right? And so from that starting point, then we can start to apply it to our body. And we see, this body is always changing. And what I think of as me is also changing. And so there's nothing permanent. And then we continue with feelings. We see, okay, pleasant feelings, they come, they go. And then we just let them. Unpleasant feelings, they come and they go, and we let them flow. And then the same with our perceptions. We see, these thoughts I have every day. I wake up, the same, thinking about that person, thinking about, those words, those difficult conversations that we've had, and we suffer. So just let it go. And the same with our mental formations. Our anger is impermanent. Thank goodness. Imagine if our anger was permanent. Right? So we don't repress the anger, we fully recognize it. So just like Heraclitus stepping into the stream is there, but it's a continuum. And sometimes we are in the rapids and it's frothing, right, with white water. And then it becomes calm again. So the practice is not to deny that sometimes the water is turbulent. So when anger is there, we fully recognize it. We let ourselves shine the light of mindfulness on it so that we can see and understand why is it angry. Just like when we look at the stream, we understand that there's more slope in the course of the riverbed, and so the water has to flow more quickly, and it is not as deep, and so it passes through the rocks and it's very agitated. And so the same is true of our anger. When we look into the anger, we can recognize it, accept it, and hold it in the light of mindfulness. So we talk about embracing our anger with mindfulness for the purpose of understanding, these are the causes and conditions, these are the perceptions, these are the feelings that I've been holding onto, that have brought about the conditions for this anger to manifest. And also we can experience the feelings that come with that anger. Are those feelings pleasant? Are they unpleasant? And then by letting go, then the anger becomes less, because we no longer grasp. So emotions like anger, despair, there's some kind of grasping underneath that. There's something that we don't want to let go of. And that is our body, our feelings, our perceptions, mental formations, and even our consciousness. Like in our awareness, we want to be aware. Like I am aware of my eyes, my ears, my nose, tongue, body, and mind, and I think that awareness is me, but I know that awareness is impermanent. That this awareness will also pass away. And if my eyes become damaged, then the visual consciousness that I think of as me experiencing the world is not there anymore. I realize it's dependent on my eyes. The same for my ear, my nose. So Thay often invites us to get in touch with the wonder of being able to see in the present moment, being able to see all the millions of colors, faces of our friends on the path. Not for the sake of grasping, but for the sake of really recognizing the wonder of the present moment so that we can fully enjoy it while it's still here. And then we feel if we go blind, we can still be happy and joyful because we've really enjoyed our eyes while they're working. The same is true of our body, our legs. We have 2 legs that can walk. So enjoy when you can walk. Like going on the gatewalk today. Walk down in the moonlight, and it's such a wonder. Not everyone has legs in good working condition, but those of us here, we're able to walk, and so we can enjoy our walking. Just these simple things bring so much happiness. So enjoying in the present moment what's going on allows us to let go of our grasping. So enjoy your good health, but you know that it's impermanent, and then you're free. So the way to not get caught in this idea of nihilism or annihilationism, like these monks that try to kill themselves to be free, is to recognize that there is a continuum. There is a flowing continuum of this body, of these feelings, these perceptions. They're not just random. It's not just random events happening. There's cause and effect. And so how we keep our perceptions in the present moment, that will affect how our feelings, for example, may be in the future. What we attend to with our eye, consciousness, ear, nose, tongue, that will have an effect on our perceptions in the future. So there's a continuum, there's a relationship. And that continuum is usually what we call a separate self. We make the mistake, we think because there's relationship, there's connection, interchange between one thing and the other, that there's a permanent separate self. And that is me. Maybe we can listen to a bell. When I finished university, when I finished college, I felt so, I felt trapped. I had this degree, but actually I felt like I was in some kind of prison. Many of my friends, they were getting jobs, some of them in finance or going to graduate school, and I had my parents had gotten divorced, and I was asking myself, like, who am I? Like, I want to know. I mean, yeah, getting a job, making money, but what's the point of all that if I don't have a clue who I am or what I'm supposed to be doing? And so at that time, I just wanted to step out of this stream that I felt trapped in, this high velocity, these high velocity rapids that I found myself just coursing down, to step out. So the only thing I could think to do is to leave the country. Okay. And so I went and I lived with a friend in Ireland, and ended up getting a job teaching English in Spain. And I didn't have an answer, but I said, okay, I want to step out of this stream, this crazy stream of a career, and which I knew was not going anywhere. And I met many teachers, sometimes just on the street, asking myself this question, who am I? And I learned, without calling it that, this teaching on non-self. I learned how many people there are out there who are doing kind things, good things for themselves, for others, without putting a name on it, without having a title, without having a salary, without having a resume or a curriculum vitae, right? About all the kind things they have done, the compassionate acts they have done to themselves and to others. And so I wanted to go deeper into that space and just go with whatever happened, which can be dangerous also, especially if we don't have a mindfulness trainings. And I don't want to go too much into it, but I got involved in activism, and I was living in squats in Paris, and just getting the leftover bread from the bakery, going dumpster diving for food, getting whatever's left over at the market, and living together with young people who are living like that. And I just wanted to go deeper and deeper, just letting go of any idea of myself. Almost like self-negation in a way. I didn't have this practice yet, but somehow I knew that the story of myself is not true. I can tell myself many kinds of stories, and ultimately none of them will be completely true. They're only just approximations. And at some point, after a few years of living like that, I came back to the US, and I was after 4 years of university, and then maybe 3 years, something like that. Like I had to live with my parents for 7 years, and by now my mom was divorced and living by herself. And she's a wonderful person. She's just one of the most amazing moms. But it was so difficult to be a 24-year-old who's living on their own and coming back to suddenly live in his mom's house. And the idea that my mom had of me was not somehow in conjunction with the reality that I had been living, and I could not explain. And so I felt this kind of deep cognitive dissonance. And I could not go to see some of my old friends. I felt some kind of shame, like I could not explain this experience. Now I would call it experience of non-self, of becoming free of my idea, or the idea which is imposed on us by our community, by society, by the way we look, the way we talk, the way, and so forth. What we do. And so for many months I ended up in a depression. I actually felt, I was so angry. I was angry. I didn't want to get a job because I didn't want to have a car and a house and a family and kids. All these things that are just exacerbating the climate crisis. This is like around 2000. But I didn't know what can I do? What kind of way of living can I embark on that is not going to just contribute to this crisis that we are living on the planet Earth? And so the best I could do was just to go for walks every day in the forest. Luckily, my mom's house is in the forest near the river that I grew up on. She had moved to a different house than the one I grew up in, but not far away. And so I would just go for long walks in the forest every day. And I didn't know much about meditation at that point, but I had my dog who was quite old. It's a beagle named Pepper. Actually, I felt after that one dog, I don't think I can ever have a dog again. I don't know if you've ever had a dog that's just so wonderful, then you feel like you can't possibly have another dog like that. Anyway, I'm a monk, so I can't have a dog. It makes it easy. And I always remember one day that I was so confused and so angry, and I didn't have anyone that I felt I could communicate what I'd been experiencing to. And it had snowed, so there was snow everywhere, and I went for this long walk, and many, many miles away from the house on the road. And my dog Pepper, he had a radio collar, and there's a boundary around the house because he's a beagle and they love to wander. So, and then my mom had put this collar on him to keep him from going out of the yard. And I must have been maybe 3 miles away from the house, and suddenly he came running up behind me. And I'll never forget that moment, because I was so alone, I was so angry, I was so confused. And it's like maybe I exaggerate in my mind, but I felt like he had taken that pain of running through the shock of the radio fence, because he knew I was suffering, and he wanted to be there. I don't know. But that's what I felt in that moment. And yeah, it's just this great companion that just helped me through this time, this difficult moment, as my mom also did. But then I went to a yoga center and I saw people meditating for the first time. And I just was able to sit there for 20 minutes or whatever. We would do different kinds of yoga, but what I remember is just sitting there, following my breathing, and suddenly just saying, well, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know. I really don't know anything, actually. I know lots of things, but I don't know anything but I can follow my breath. I can sit here. That I can do. And I found people who I could talk to. I could explain what I've been going through. And they listened and they understood. And I thought, oh my gosh, where have these people been Yeah. Everyone I talk to, they just say, well, did you get a job? Did you do this? And suddenly I remember this couple at the yoga center, and I could explain what I'd been through, what I'd been living, this experience of non-self. I didn't call it that, but of just letting go of the story that had been given to me by my parents, by my community, by my education. And I felt understood. That was so important. And so I said, okay, I'm going to learn meditation. And a little bit later, I went to I think my mom heard about a Buddhist monastery nearby. There were not many monks or nuns there, but it had a big Buddhist statue. It was a Chinese temple. Actually, it's close to Blue Cliff Monastery, if you've been there. I think it's Chunghua Temple, something like that. And next to the Buddha statue, they had a little book that was called The Four Arousings of Mindfulness, which we call the Four Establishments of Mindfulness, the Satipatthana Sutta. And it was in English on one page and Chinese on the other. And I thought, I took that booklet, it was free, and I memorized it. I said, okay, this is something I can do. It's not just philosophy for the sake of thinking. Try to think through suffering, it doesn't work. This is inviting me to come back to my body and just sit there, follow my breathing. And I don't have to think about anything. I don't need to solve any problem. I don't need to impress anyone with my deep thinking. I just need to be aware of my breath, aware of my body, aware of the movements of my body, the position of my body, the impermanence of my body, and the same of my feelings, my mind, and all phenomena. And it was suddenly joy. I felt I saw myself, I saw my mind changing so quickly and growing. It's like this sustenance, kind of food that I had been missing. And it felt like my body is glowing with joy and happiness. And so that, I can say within a few days, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to become a Buddhist monk. I wanted to live the Dhamma, and that's it. And so that's what I've tried to do until now. Not focusing on anything. I don't need to attain anything. I don't need to have a title or a position or even be a very good monk. But I just do my best to practice the Dhamma and to learn the Dhamma deeper, to understand it. Because the more I do it, the more free I feel, the more happiness, the more joy. So that is, so that self that I found myself crashing back into, coming back home, literally coming back to live with my mom. It's like I saw that it's not that the self that I left behind when I went to get rid of it, or the non-self that I tried to realize living outside the country, that either of those are wrong. It's just that actually it's the grasping. It's this idea that I need to have a story, that there needs to be coherence to this self, rather than just this wondrous experience of this. This the suchness of things. It's already enough. I don't need to have a story. Even that story can be told many, many different ways. It's just one way of telling the story. Just like all of us, we have unlimited ways in which we can tell the story of our lives. it's because this is always changing, it's always growing, and our way of looking is always changing and growing. And as soon as we've told the story, it's already past. It's already changed. So seeing this as a stream that's always flowing and growing. So coming to the monastery, practicing, the reason we have the working meditation, we have sitting meditation, we have walking meditation, sleeping meditation, is to give us a space, an area where we can, no one's going to pressure us to be anything. We try to set everything up so that you don't have to be anyone. And we don't do it perfectly. We try our best, but even as monks and nuns, we still have our perceptions, and we still are on the path. And that's why I always have compassion. When I feel hurt by somebody, something they say or do, I think they're also on the path. I'm on the path. And I don't expect them to be perfect. Sometimes as practitioners, we expect everyone else to be perfect, but we expect everyone else to understand our shortcomings. Do you ever notice that? It's like, very quick to say like how that person's not practicing non-self, or they're not kind or compassionate, but we expect everyone else to understand when we're angry or unkind, or, right? So, yeah. So the practice center is there for us just to practice to be a stream flowing, to not have to be anything in particular, to not grasp on. And actually, when we realize that continuum happening in every moment, we see that we're intimately connected and interchanging with everything else in the universe, with the air, with the sun, with the earth, with the bacteria in our body. We no longer have that artificial, conceptual separation of this body or these feelings or these perceptions that we create with our mind that cuts us off from the rest of the universe. There's an ebb and flow that's constantly happening. Maybe we can listen to another sound of the bell. So the Buddha taught that there are 3 wrong views concerning the self. So the first one is that the body, or the feelings, perceptions, is the self. It means the skandhas are the self. 5 skandhas are the self. So I think I've covered that pretty well. So that's for if we have that wrong view, we think this body is me. When the body changes, then we suffer. And it's always changing. And the same is true of feelings, perceptions. We think, oh, I'm a mindfulness practitioner, I should always be joyful. And yet we are sad. And we wonder, but that sadness doesn't fit with my idea of who I am, right? Myself, right? So, but that's because we have a wrong view about the self. And perceptions, I'm always a kind person because I'm practicing in the monastery. So then when we hurt someone, we cannot accept that we've hurted them. We think that they've done something wrong. They need to practice. It can't be possibly me that has contributed to the situation. And so forth. So this is the first, so that when we say wrong view, it means it's a view that brings about suffering. If you hold on to the view in any way that the 5 skandhas, this body is me, then there's suffering. The second wrong view is that the 5 skandhas are different from the self. So we take the view that, okay, I can accept that this body is not me, mine or myself, and these feelings are not me, mine or myself. But there is a self outside of the body, feelings, perception, mental formation, and consciousness. So there's some kind of metaphysical entity that is outside, which then goes from one body to the other, to another, or so forth. Like a simplistic idea of reincarnation. And so somehow that self is not affected by the vicissitudes of the 5 skandhas of the daily life, right? But if there is this self outside of the 5 skandhas, can we be aware of it? And when we are aware of it, then isn't it consciousness? Or a mental formation? Or a perception? So when we create an idea of the self, right away it becomes part of the 5 skandhas. Because we have a perception about it, we are aware of it, we're conscious of it, and we have an emotional response to it, feeling, right? And so there's nothing outside of the 5 skandhas, actually, that can experience the self. So actually, it becomes just a mental formation, a construct of our mind. Is that clear? Is everyone not clear? Right? Once we have an idea like, okay, I can accept that none of these 5 things are myself. So then with mindfulness, I try to see where is So if it's not this body, if it's not these feelings, if it's not these perceptions, not my emotions or mental formations, it's not consciousness itself that is the self, but something somehow other that is permanent, unchanging. All these things are changing, but there is something that is not. Then we will tend to grasp at that thing. So we want to understand it, we want to touch it. But that thing can, if we touch it, if we are aware of it, then already it changes. It has entered into contact with the impermanence of all things. You see? And so we see that actually there's nothing there. There's no conductor. Let me give an example. So Thầy often would use to talk about the phrase, the wind is blowing. But now I ask you, if there's no blowing going on, where is the wind? How can there be wind without blowing? So what sense does it make to say the wind is blowing? So the same is true of the five skandhas. So if we talk about this self, which is somehow outside of the five skandhas, which has body, feelings, perceptions, mental formation, consciousness, well then, what is that self without the five skandhas? This operating of the body, of the feelings. The same could be true for the rain, right? We say, the rain is falling. And so Thay would ask, well, if the rain is, what sense does it make to say the rain is falling? If it's not falling, it's not rain. So we can just say rain, and we already know there's falling going on. And the same is true of the wind. When we say the wind, there's already blowing going on. So there's no, the very definition of the wind is blowing. Just like the rain is by nature falling. And so there's no rain, just like there's no self that is existing outside of the operation of our body, feelings, perceptions. You see? If you take away the body, feelings, perceptions, mental formation, consciousness, then what self can there be? Just like if you take out the falling, how can you say it's the rain? Or how can you, if you take away the blowing, how can you say that it's wind? So this is a kind of trick that language can play on us. We talk about a self, and we attribute qualities to that self. And because we're attached to it, we can accept that these things are all impermanent, but we want something else to be there that's outside of all these impermanent things. And so the Buddha taught there is the unconditioned nirvana, right? There is going beyond the conditioned world. But that is not something you can call a self. So we mistake nirvana sometimes for a self. The unconditioned nature, which cannot be grasped. It can only be experienced. So we have to be very careful, because we are attached to this present moment and we keep grasping, then we create a self, when actually it's just the unconditioned nature, which is not a self. It's free from anything
anything you can call any kind of quality. So we don't want to mistake that there is something outside of these 5 skandhas that is somehow the self. And then the third one, there is this, that there is a self in the skandhas, or the skandhas are in the self. So that the self is not the 5 skandhas, nor do the 5 skandhas belong to the self, but that they are residing in each other. Gives you a headache. They're all just convoluted ways of trying to keep our attachment to a self. So instead of just letting go and seeing that all of these are just a stream, a continuum, and that our experience of the present moment is not outside of that stream. We feel like we need something permanent, a separate self. And so we try to say that the self is in the 5 skandhas. We already accept that they are not the 5 skandhas. We accept that they are not different from the 5 skandhas. So then we say, well, there's a self in the 5 skandhas, or the skandhas are in the self. They are somehow mutually within each other. So this is just, again, grasping. It's just kind of attachment. We just want to put the self somewhere. So we miss the point, which is that this teaching is not for the purpose of description. It's not for the purpose of philosophy or establishing some kind of existential relationship. But it's for the purpose of helping us to become more free and happy. When we see that the body is impermanent, it is free, it doesn't have a separate self, then we are no longer attached. We become less attached to the body. We become less attached to our feelings and perceptions. And so for so long as we try to keep putting something in there, this is always something that we try to grasp because we want to arrive at this self. Like I said, in my own story, I want to understand, who am I? What am I doing? What am I supposed to do? And actually, that question, for me as a young person, progressed. And so first I said, well, who am I? Well, I could say I'm this name, I was born in this place, I did these things, I have these friends, I like to study this, I don't like to study that, I like to eat this, I don't like to eat that. But ultimately, that's all just conditioning. So, I think for me it's more helpful to go along and say, well, what should I do? What do I need to do? I found that much more helpful. It's like, even if I know who I am, I still won't know what to do. And that's when the Dhamma was so helpful. Well, I can do this. I can practice the Dhamma. I can I can follow my breathing. I can practice impermanence. If I don't know what to do, I can do that. And the more I do that, the more I become free, the more I feel joy. So I want to keep doing that. And so I don't need to try to go searching within these things to try to find myself. And I don't need to try to put these inside my idea of a self. Does that make sense? So this teaching on the wrong views around the self is for the purpose of freedom. And non-self is also gives us the insight of impermanence. And when we see things as impermanence, we see non-self. So these two concentrations are going together. And just to finish, when we talk about a continuum, we also see it as like points of light. A person who is standing holding a torch. And the flame. And turning it in a circle, right? At any moment, the torch, you like my picture? At any moment, the torch is at one point. But we know in the darkness, if you've ever seen somebody who throws fire, the appearance is like a continuum, a circle. So when we look deeply into consciousness, we see that actually it's just made up of instance of consciousness. And that's for our freedom, because in every moment you can change. You can decide not to say that unkind thing. You can say something compassionate. You can decide not to water the seed of anger. You can come back to your breathing. Water seeds of joy. If you see that at every moment there's an opportunity to change. So if we continue to believe in a self, we think that this circle of light is one permanent entity and we cannot change. There's no chance for impermanence to happen. And that is why we get stuck in our thinking about a self or myself. So, meditation, mindfulness of breathing, mindfulness of consciousness is for the purpose of seeing these instants of consciousness and making a change, seeing that it's possible to train our mind to go in the direction of kindness, to go in the direction of love, to go in the direction of peace, and not to continue to take the path of anger, of fear, of jealousy. So this is how the teaching on non-self is a deep training in Buddhist psychology, in healing and transformation. Okay. Thank you.